Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to present the third part of Achilles' angry speech, where he threatens to return back to Phthia with his followers. So, Iliad 1, lines 165 to 171. Alatomen pleon poluaikos polemoio, ke resemai diapus, ata ein potedasmos hiketai, soi togeros polu mesdon, ego dolegon tepilonte, ekon epineas, epeke gamo polemesdon. Nun de me pleten epe e polupeteron este, oi cademen sun use coronesen, ude so ioi, en dat atemos et on, apenos kai ploton apus den. Okay. Ala tomen pleon, polua ekos polemoio. So, to pleon is the greater part, i.e. the lion's share, literally the more. And we have a partitive genitive generated by that. The greater part of what? The greater part of polu I ekos polemoio. And polu I ekos is an adjective, an epithet of war or battle, meaning rushing or violent. So, alatomen pleon polu ekos polemoio. Ke resemai diapus, ata ein potedasmos hiketai. Now, keres is one of the legitimately irregularly declined nouns that you find listed at Smythe section 283. So this is a very good section just to eye over. And we see the varied forms and formations of this word. The main thing being the variation between the stem, which can be epsilon, iota, or simple epsilon. So you see these various forms that Homer can employ, and even Herodotus sometimes. Now, diepo is to manage, to carry on, conduct. And so the object of that is tomen pleon polu ekos polemoio. Diepo, to manage or carry on, conduct. Now the altar here is a strong adversative, and here is Smythe's explanation of it. He says altar, which is prepositive, and Homer also has altar, we've seen that, is usually poetical, but is found in Xenophon and Plato, and is an adversative conjunction commonly used to introduce a strong or surprising contrast, i.e. but yet, however, and sometimes to introduce a slight contrast, and then. But it is introduces a contrast that is stronger than that which is usually expressed by de. Altar is common as a correlative to men. It is often found in lively questions to introduce an objection, in rapid transitions, and sometimes it serves to introduce the apodosis of a conditional sentence. Atar was largely displaced by the stronger Allah. So you really don't see atar much after Homer, but again, it's on this continuum where you have de, atar, and Allah, Allah being the stronger. Ke resemai diepus ata ein potedasmos hiketai. So again, Dasmos is a masculine noun meaning division or distribution based on the verb dio. So I gave us the entry of diomai, so you can see it occurs in the middle in Homer and signifies to divide, whereas the active is the verb diizdo, the future dasdomai, and in Epic you can see the double sigma, but I want to direct your attention to this first aorist, dasamen, and then the perfect dasmai. So that's where you see the base for this noun form, das mos, the delta alpha sigma, das mos. So altar en potet das mos hiketai, and hiketai from ikneomai, to arrive, to come. En potet hiketai, we have again one of these temporal sentences of indefinite frequency. We had one earlier, so I'm not going to belabor this point. But consult Smythe's 2410 and 2412. And then I believe it's, Goodwin, who has this nice little note. In Homer, the subjunctive appears in the protasis in general suppositions only 19 times, and the optative only once. Homer has 2 cases of ein and 2 of a ke. So Goodwin gets down to these detailed statistics, which, I don't know, it's not that important, but sometimes fun to know. So ata en potet das mos hiketai, soy togeras polu mesdon, ego dolegon tepilonte. So soy egode, we have this contrast, but the soy represents a dative of possession. So the dative of the possessor, the person for whom a thing exists, is put in the dative with anai, gigneskai, huparkane, punai, poetic, when he or she is regarded as interested in its possession. And polu mesdon, of course, means much greater. Soy togeras polu mesdon. Agode, so we have this contrast, you on the one hand, but on the other hand, my situation is otherwise. And then Smythe has this nice note explaining the difference between the dative of possessor and the genitive. So let's look at this closely. The dative of the possessor denotes that something is at the disposal of a person or has fallen to his share temporarily. The genitive of possession lays stress on the person who owns something. So the dative answers the question, what is it that he has? Whereas the genitive answers the question, who is it that has something? The uses of the 2 cases are often parallel but not interchangeable. Thus, in Kyros, who su esse to apotude, Cyrus, to whom you will henceforth belong, in this case, in place of the who, the genitive, hoi, the dative, would be inappropriate. Kyros, who su esse to apotude. To apotude is just a way of saying henceforth, the from here on forward. Whereas with a noun in the genitive, the dative of possessor is used, whereas with a noun in the dative, the genitive of possessor can get used. So we have examples from Thucydides. First, where there's a genitive, with a noun in the genitive, the dative of possession is used. Ton hekaterois sumakon, of the allies, belonging to each side. Or the other example with a noun in the dative where the genitive of possession is used. tois he auton sumarkois, for the allies of themselves. So this, my 1480, is a nice explanation of the subtle difference between genitive and datives of possession. So this olegon te pelonte, it's a nice use of te adversatively, small but dear. Olegon te pelonte, small but dear. Don't see this very often. Erkomai ekon epineas, epike kamo polemisdon. So this ekon here is a supplementary participle, and we see Smythe 2099, that with some verbs of coming and going, like erkomai, the participle specifies the manner of coming and going and contains the main idea. So ekon is here conveying the main idea. I go off having in my possession. Okay, I have in my possession when I return. So these examples he gives are good. First, be pugon, he took to flight, i.e. went fleeing. Oikontai diokontes, they have gone in pursuit. Dioko is to pursue. Oikontai diokontes. And then oikomen anagomenos, anagomai is to put out to sea. So they have gone, having put out to sea, translated as I put out to sea. And then oiketai danon, dano is to die. He is dead and gone, from Sophocles. Oiketai danon. And then from Xenophon, u tuto lexon erkomai. I am not going to say this. So in these cases, again, with verbs of coming and going, the participle attached specifies the manner of coming and going, and it's the participle that contains the main idea. Now, as to the form of ekom, you have this note here, Smythe 72D, the bottom of the page, that epic admits elision of sigma iota and alpha iota in the personal endings. So we have the elision of alpha iota of the first person singular. Erkom ekon epeneas. Epeke kamo polemesdon. So kamno is a very important verb. You see it very often. It means to labor, to be weary or sick. And so it has these various forms. Kamumai, that again is the middle formed future when you're talking about a bodily function or act. Ekamon, the second aorist. Kekmeka, your perfect, active. And apokmeteos, your verbal adjective. But then in epic, you have these odd forms, kekamo, a second aorist subjunctive, and then ekamomen, second aorist middle, and a second perfect participle, kekmeos. So these are worth studying. Kamno, kamumai, ekamon, kekmeka, apokmeteos, kekamo, ekamomen, kekmeos. Very important verb. So again, we see another use of the supplementary participle in the latter part of this line. Epe kekamo polemisdon. Here, the supplementary participle completes the idea of the verb by showing that to which its action relates. So, 2089, the supplementary participle agrees either with the subject or with the object of the main verb. So here it's agreeing with the subject. Achilles, with the subject when the verb is intransitive or passive, and with the object when the verb is transitive. So here, kamo is intransitive. And so the example, I never cease pitying ourselves, upot eparomen hemas oiktiron. I never cease pitying ourselves. But this is an example of that use, or this use of the supplementary participle with verbs signifying to begin, to cease, to endure, to grow weary of an action. So the polemizon specifies the action that Achilles grows weary of. Epe ke kamo polemizon. Nun de mi bintein epe e polupeteron este. So, nun de mi, this is a use of de called resumptive de, which you have to translate something like, but as the case stands, but as things are. And remember, eme in the indicative present always means I shall go, I am going. It can sometimes have the present meaning as well, but here, I'm going to go. But now as it is, I shall go. Pitiende. And so back to Pitya, back home. And we have the suffix, or the suffix de, indicating the place to which. Pitiende. And so here's the map again of Pitya. You see it, the home of Achilles, far, far from Troy, that he's saying, I'm just going to go back home. So, very good. Now, the particle a with a smooth breathing and a circumflex. This is an affirmative particle that translates truly, truly much better. And looking at the details, as exposited by Denniston and then Smythe. So Denniston tells us that this is an affirmative particle used mostly with adjectives and adverbs. This is mainly a verse idiom and is hardly found at all in oratory, except for amen and the common use of epu in an a fortiori argument. And I'll let you look that up, what an a fortiori argument is if you don't already know. Now, and this is now from Denniston. Baumlein, or all this is from Denniston so far, Baumlein maintains that expresses subjective certainty, a view borne out by the fact that Homer never, except one case in the Odyssey, uses in propria persona, that is, when he's speaking in his narrative voice, but he only uses it in speeches. And likewise in prose, except in certain combinations, the ones mentioned above for oratory, amen, epu, the particle is almost confined wholly to dialogue. So it's something that you do see in Plato. If this view is correct, then amen, ede, mean, strictly speaking, I am certain that really, amen, ede. So, this slide gives us a sense of the contrast between Denniston's great exhaustive work on the particles and the little bit that Smythe gives you at the back of his grammar to introduce you to them, where Smythe just tells you right off the bat that he calls it asseverative which is prepositive. That means it comes first in the clause, meaning in truth, in sooth, verily, upon my word. So he has an example from Plato's Gorgias, e kalos leges. Yes, truly, you speak well. Okay. Vorkad imen suneusi koronesen ude soeo. So here, this imen is an epic form of the infinitive, made up of mu, epsilon, nu. And so if you look at 773D in Smythe at the bottom of the page, you see all the varied, odder forms, the dialect forms of amed, to go. And so here, the second line of 773D, you see under the infinitive that you have mni, mn, and itni, which only occurs twice because he prefers these other forms and the other irregular forms of the various tenses and moods. So one gets used to these infinitives in men and meni pretty quickly in Homer, so they're not really much to sweat. Roikad idmen suneuse koronesen, udese oio. So, looking more closely at the syntax of mn, here we have the infinitive as actually the subject of the whole clause. Epe e polupeteron esten roikad idmen. So it's better, or literally, to go home is better. To go homeward is better. The mn is actually the subject. So as Smythe expresses it at 1984, the infinitive may be used as subject, especially with quasi-impersonal verbs or expressions. Now this is really important. So I'm going to look at this section 1985, which talks about these types of expressions that will use the infinitive as its subject. So he says, such quasi-impersonal verbs as expressions are de, it is necessary, cre, which is properly a substantive with este omitted, it is necessary, doce, it seems good, esten, it is possible, ex este, it is in one's power, oyonte esten, it is possible. Plato uses that quite a bit, or even in a personal form, oyoste, he or she is able. Prepe, or proseke, it is fitting, and sumbaine, it happens. Herodotus really likes sumbaine. And many expressions formed by este with a predicate noun, which is what we have here right now, beteron este. So he gives the example of axion este, dikaion este, anankaion este, dunaton este, adunaton este, or adunata esten, aiskron esten, kalon esten, hora, and kairos esten. So, axion esten, it is right, dikaion esten, it is just, anakaion esten, it is necessary, dunaton esten, it is possible, adunaton or adunata esten, it is impossible, aiskron esten, it is disgraceful, kalon esten, it is honorable, hora or kairos esten, it is time. With the last two expressions, the old dative use of the infinitive is clear, i.e., it is time for considering. Hora buleuestai. So, it's very, this is a very important, set of idioms, a bit to understand. And so I would highly suggest, copying this out, making flashcards, getting these words that trigger this, that can trigger the infinitive of subject in your mind, because they are very, very common, and you'll see them quite a bit. So, epe e peteron este, voikadid men suneusi koronesen. Ude so io. Oh, but first we have to look at korones. Korones, this is an adverb, or an adjective, which means curved, and it's an epithet of ships, referring to the upward curve at bow and stern. So, neusi or neese koronesen is a very common, you'll just see it quite a bit, curved ships. So finally, or almost finally, Uda made it as a conjunction. We'll just look at the first bit. Smythe 2932. Uda made it as a conjunction means and not, nor. So it connects two or more whole clauses. So, Peteron esten voikad id mansun neusi koronesen. Uda so o. Entadatemos eon. Apenos kai pluton apupsen. So, like the Uda, it's best I do this, nor do I think. And so it begins with the sigma, with the elision, and epic allows rarely the elision of moi, soy, and toi. And this is a rare case where you would, because he's going to heap up wealth for you. I do not think that it's good to heap up wealth. And so, entada, this is a word that's a little frustrating because it can sometimes mean here or there, but it can also mean direction to, thither or hither. But in this case, it just means here. Ude so oi, entad atemose on, apenos kai pluton a pusen. So the rest of the vocabulary here. Atimos, held in no respect, regard, or esteem. Apenos, neuter, wealth or riches. Here it's the accusative. Plutos, again neuter, wealth and abundance. And then apuksein is a future infinitive from apuso, to heap up. So, ud so o, entad atemos on, apenos kai pluton apuksein. And then you take the apuksein going all the way back to the dative to heap up for you wealth and abundance. Okay. So, ala tomen pleon, polu a ikos polemoio. Ke resemai diapus, ata ein potadasmoth hiketai, soi togeros pelumes don, ego dolegon tepelonte, ergon epeneas, epike kamos polemes don, nun de mi end, epe e pulupeteron este, voicadid men suneosi coronesen, ude so ilioi, entad atemos eon, apenos kai pluton apuksen. Okay, so there we have it.